Hello and welcome. We are going to go through this process of setting up our Visual Studio Code C++ development environment. You see we are online at code.visualstudio.com, and the first step is to download. So I'm operating on Windows. If you're on another operating system, it will be slightly different, but we see we were able to quickly download the executable. It's down here. I'm using Chrome as my browser, and I'll then go to open this up. Give me a warning. I'll select run. First, we'll have to accept the agreement. Hit next. The default install application is perfectly fine, so I'll hit next as well. Yes, create program shortcuts. And then the next couple options are really up to your discretion. I would say a desktop icon would be very useful. We do want to add opening code to Windows Explorer file context menus, as well as the open with code action. We want to register code as an editor for our supported file type. So if you're looking at a file in your Windows Explorer and you want to open it, you want Windows to know that Visual Studio Code is capable of editing those files. And then you also see it says add to path, which requires a shell restart. So we want to do that as well. So all those are turned on, move forward, and we start the installation process. Of course, we want to go ahead and open it up. And since I've had this installed previously, I actually have, so I uninstalled it so I can create this video. However, what you will see is it saves some of my default settings, but you'll likely come to this initial welcome screen. And one of the first things that we want to do is we want to make sure we install the appropriate extensions for the work that we want to do. So if I go to extensions, you'll see that mine are actually still enabled even though I uninstalled Visual Studio Code. But the first one we want is C++. And so if you were looking for that, you can just search in the extensions. If you start typing C/C++ or C, you'll see these pop up. And you're looking for the one that's developed by Microsoft. That is the one that we're looking for, the official one from Microsoft that will have this icon. And so what we'll have to do is, for you, this button will be install. So you'll want to install that one. And what you'll see in the details here is that's not the end of the road. So for our class, we're going to be using the Windows C++ compiler that is in MinGW. And you'll see here, this overview says getting started with C++ and MinGW W64. That's very important because we don't have the commercial version of Visual Studio, which is Microsoft's commercial product. And so we'll be using an open source compiler that would allow us to compile and run C and C++ code. So if we click here, it actually will take us to a full instruction manual on how to set up Visual Studio Code with MinGW W64. And so we've already completed step 1 of installing Visual Studio Code. We've already installed the C and C++ extension for VS Code. And now we need to install MinGW. So this link right here says install MinGW W64 is stored on the website called SourceForge. So we're going to actually click there. It may look a little sketchy to you, but this is a legit location for where we download this code. And so we'll click right here where it says SourceForge. And that will actually begin the process of downloading MinGW to your computer. So MinGW, just like Visual Studio Code, is executable. It's already downloaded, and we will go ahead and open that up, and it's perfectly fine. So we want to hit run. Of course, that popped up in another window. And so now we're at the MinGW online installer. We're going to hit next. And here are all the options for version architecture. All the defaults here are perfectly fine. So we're going to hit next again. Now this next step is super important. We do not want to install MinGW at this default location with this really long name, because it'll be a pain to include this path in all of our configuration files. So what I recommend, and what I've done for all of the lab computers, and for consistency, it will be great if all your setups are identical. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to save this. We're going to delete all this extra stuff, and we are going to install MinGW to C:/\MinGW-W64, all lowercase except for the capital C for the destination drive. And so this is where we want to install MinGW. So once that's correct, please verify that's exactly correct, then we can hit next. And this will go through the process of down. We'll let that do its thing. And while that's going, we'll actually flip back. We can actually close that tab because we're done with that. We'll flip back to this instructions for setting up MinGW W64 for Visual Studio Code. And we'll see the next step is to add the path to our MinGW bin folder to the Windows path environment variable. And so in order to do this, you will need to be a administrator on that computer. So let's check back on our install. It's still doing its thing. And when that finishes up, we'll go ahead and move on to that next step of adding MinGW to our Windows path. Okay, I wanted to just pause that and let this finish up so you don't have to sit here and watch the scroll bar go. So it has completed the installation. We're going to now hit next, and now we can go to finish. So as we see, step 4, the next step is to add that path to our Windows path environment variable. So we'll have to go to our start menu, and then we'll go to settings. Of course, that opened up over there. And then I'll just start here and I'll type path. And what you'll see is that it allows me to edit the system environment variables. So you can edit either for the system or for the account. I think my personal preference is to do it for the system, and that way, no matter who's logged in, it works perfectly fine. So let's click to edit those system environment variables. And it may ask you to authenticate your administrative credentials. However, I've already done that, and so now we can go to the next step, and I'll click here for environment variables. And so these are the user environment variables up here, and down below are the system environment variables. And so we're going to look for the one that's called path. So this is the one that's called path, and now I want to hit edit. And now we can add this to our system path. I thought I had already added this, but it's not there. All right, so let's do it. So what we'll have to do at this point is we want to say new, and the path is actually where we install MinGW2. So if you guys remember, it was C:/MinGW-W64, but that's not actually Explorer to some extent. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of showing you, I'm just gonna tell you what the path is. So it's MinGW-W64, but then we also need to go MinGW32, and what we're looking for is that actual bin folder. The bin folder is where all of the executables live, and that's where we want to add what we need to add to our path. So that's all done. So C:/MinGW-W64/MinGW32/bin. We hit OK. We hit OK again. We hit OK one more time, and now it's our chance to test it to see if it works. So what they say is check your MinGW installation. So we're going to open a terminal window. So I'll just go here and I'll do CMD, which is the command prompt, and we can use that to test. So we say G++ space -- version. Yes, and it gave me something. So if you get an error or you get something command not found, then that's when you know something is not quite working correctly, and you'll have to redouble and check your steps. So gdb -- version. Yes. So that means that installation worked perfectly fine, and now we can move on to the next step.